Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week, Brent Walls. He's the Upper Potomac Riverkeeper. Brent, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you for inviting me.
And what is a riverkeeper?
Riverkeeper is essentially a person who stands up for the river that they're in charge of, the voice for that river. And so myself and two other riverkeepers in the Potomac River watershed, we do what we can to protect the rivers from pollution.
And what's the definition of the Upper Potomac?
So the Upper Potomac runs from Harper's Ferry all the way up to Fairfax Stone. I have 4 states in my region: Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, a little bit of Virginia.
How long have you been the riverkeeper?
I've been riverkeeper for about 7 years.
And it's a nonprofit. It's a national nonprofit, right?
Yeah, it's a local nonprofit that's part of an international movement of riverkeepers. So there's over 300 riverkeepers worldwide.
What's the state of the Upper Potomac River now?
It's generally, with the weather that we've had this year, it's actually in pretty good shape. I've witnessed a ton of underwater grasses in the Potomac and in the South Branch, and that's usually a pretty good sign that we've had some clear water for the year.
Is it clean?
It's clean enough to where you can swim in it and fish.
And can you eat the fish?
Yeah, I think generally you could eat the fish. There are some things to look out for.
What do you look out for?
Lesions on fish and other things about the fish itself that might be an issue.
What would cause a lesion?
Any number of things. But what have been curious about is the intersex fish issue on the South Branch that has cropped up. Pesticides and other things of that nature. After major rain events, long-term rain events, they'll affect the fish species and their abilities to procreate.
But in terms of you and your family, you would swim in the river, you would fish in the river?
Sure, all the time. I live real close to the C&O Canal. We go down to the big Slackwater area, Williamsport area, and do the rope swing, jump in the river all the time.
Right, so a big issue that's popped up recently is the proposed Mountaineer gas pipeline, which would come from Hancock, south to Berkeley Springs, east along Route 9 to Martinsburg.
Correct, yes.
Potomac, you're leading a group in opposition to it. Why?
Well, I guess the reason why we're leading opposition to it is, one, Mountaineer Gas is trying to be very quiet about it, and they're not wanting to let the public know what's going on. And we don't know the whole story. We don't know what the full plan is. And we really disagree with a company spending millions of dollars to lay down infrastructure that's based on the potential of a pipeline coming down from Pennsylvania. And that pipeline hasn't even been approved, built, nothing whatsoever. And having the Public Service Commission allow millions of dollars of infrastructure doesn't make any sense.
All right, now just to play devil's advocate and defend Mountaineer Gas for a second, they have a map. They say it's going to come from Hancock down. They show a line, and we're about where it's going to go. They've approached farmers and landowners, and they're trying to get rights of way. They've gotten some rights of way, from what we've heard.
That's right.
And what you're saying is that, are you saying that this is a pass-through pipeline, that they're just, if it's built, they're just take cheap fracked gas from Pennsylvania and send it over to Martinsburg?
It's my understanding that this system has been coined a redundant system. In the terms of that kind of area of pipeline construction, that means it's a backup system. So there's already gas coming into Martinsburg from the south. It's expensive because it's coming all the way up from Florida. That's where the gas is coming from. I think, in my view, and we don't know this for sure because they're not really telling us anything, is that the gas coming down from Pennsylvania is frack gas, and it's really cheap right now. They're trying to get it somewhere. And so because of that, they feel that this is going to be a good backup route to get there. But we don't know. We just don't know the information.
And when you say they're being secretive, actually they're before the Public Service Commission. They've cut a deal with the staff of the Public Service Commission, with other parties involved in the case.
Right.
And they've laid out a lot of information. So what do you mean, in what sense are they being secretive about this?
Well, first off, there was no public process. There wasn't really, the gas company didn't come out and talk to the public generally about what it's for, why it's going to be routed there. And, you know, to be honest, they're being kind of sneaky like most landmen. They go to the different property owners. And what I've been hearing is that, you know, they're kind of giving them a proposal. Either sign now, you get a little bit of money, or wait till later, you don't sign, we'll use eminent domain to get our pipeline through your property anyway. You know, and it's that kind of thing that is very disconcerting. But the bigger picture is not being introduced. And the bigger picture is gas coming from Pennsylvania under the Potomac River and under the national park.
That is a separate pipeline.
It is a completely separate.
And this actually came up before the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission staff was questioning Mountaineer Gas and saying, well, how can you proceed with this when the pipeline that will feed into it, a Columbia Gas pipeline, hasn't even been approved by the Board of Directors of Columbia Gas, hasn't gotten any approval from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, hasn't passed any of the hurdles. How can you go forward and lay out this pipeline if you're not even sure you're going to be able to get the gas? And what's their response to that?
Their response was, it was almost like, oh, don't worry, it's in the works.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
What do you know about that project up that will come under the C&O Canal and under the river?
So right now I know very little. I do know that Columbia Gas is in communication with the National Park Service C&O Canal Division. They're trying to get a right of entry, which is a permit that allows access to the national park grounds.
Wait, they've already applied for that.
They've applied for it. However, they have not received the permit.
Do we have the application, or is it public?
It's not. And
How did you find out about it?
interestingly enough, it was through a meeting with Mountaineer Gas that we had recently, and they indicated that that's where Columbia Gas is at in their process. And that's before they've submitted any application to FERC or Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And my concern is that when you have one federal agency giving approval for a pipeline, right of entry permit, they're going to use that as leverage in another federal process, the FERC process. And to me, without any public notice or public awareness. And so what I've begun is a campaign to talk to the National Park Service to let them know that they need to be cautious about this right of entry permit access and that it needs to be public. And I've also contacted Congressman Delaney.
Who's a congressman from that area?
From that area, correct.
Which is a Maryland congressman.
Actually, no, it's a federal congressman.
Well, wait a second. What state is the congressman from?
From Maryland.
From Maryland. Is the congressman a Republican?
No.
No. Okay.
Democrat.
A Democrat. And the congressman, you've contacted the congressman saying this is happening in your backyard.
Yeah, this is happening in your backyard. And the reason why I contacted the congressman is that there's been a movement within certain members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, that are questioning FERC's quick-handed approval of pipelines across the country. They're questioning that they're not looking at the bigger picture. And there is even a bigger picture here. I mean, we can go bigger and bigger and bigger all the way across the board. And that is, yes, cheap gas could be coming from Pennsylvania and it'll go under the Potomac River and connect to the Mountaineer gas line. But when export facilities like one at Cove Point.
Cove Point is on the Atlantic coast in Maryland.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And if once that opens up, then the gas companies are going to be shipping the frack gas overseas where it's more lucrative. And that dynamic is going to increase the cost of gas here in this country.
Interestingly, we just were interviewing Morgan County Commissioner Bob Ford, and you had a conversation with him on the way out. And what did he tell you about what his position would be on this pipeline?
He seemed to be really concerned about being a pass-through county that would take the gas and deliver it to somebody else and not have access to that gas for his county. And he's completely objecting. He seemed to be very objective about it and didn't agree with that kind of process.
So if it was just a pass-through, he might be opposed, but if we could use the gas here in Morgan County, he might be in favor.
Right, and that's the other thing that we really don't know. Mountaineer Gas is talking about distribution lines. Well, where are these distribution lines? Are we going to actually have access to all the different counties for it? And it's just a question of trying to get the information.
Now let's backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
On the meeting that you were in, this is the meeting where Berkeley County Council member Elaine Mock said that she was opposed to this.
Right.
And in response to that, Mountaineer Gas called her up and said, let's have a meeting.
Right.
And so they came to meet with her, and she invited you and others to that meeting. Do you remember the name of the Mountaineer Gas official who you were dealing with in that meeting?
It was Reed something.
Read something. Okay, so this gentleman said to you that it's his information that Columbia Gas is applying to the National Park Service for what, a right-of-way? Is that what you're calling it?
Right-of-way entry permit, yeah.
And where would that be?
That would be in the Hancock area.
So west of Hancock?
West of Hancock. And the National Park Service said, well, we didn't think there was too much of it because they're not going to actually be on the property. What they're planning on is an intensive drilling project to go north of the National Park Service property, under the National Park Service, the C&O Canal, under the Potomac River, and then come back up into the West Virginia side.
All right. Now, who are you dealing with at the National Park Service?
I don't think that they would want to have their name.
All right, so you're dealing with someone at the National Park Service. And are there any gas lines that go under the C&O Canal now?
Not that I know of, actually. Not that I know of. And that's something that I've been trying to find out. And it's pretty hard to try and figure out if there's any old gas lines.
And what do you think? So you think that for those, and for people's information, there's a major battle brewing already in the Eastern Panhandle. Yeah. There's organizing efforts. People are upset about it. One of the things that Elaine Mock, the Berkeley County council member, said was she's hearing from landowners saying that they don't like the way Mountaineer Gas is presenting themselves. Elderly people are being told, you should take the money now because, like as you said, they're not going to get the money in the future. Yeah. They're playing pretty rough with landowners and local farmers, and people don't like it. Right. So there's this movement now developing where people are concerned, and it's not just here. It seems to be. What do you know about like nationwide movements to protect water in opposition to gas pipelines?
Yeah, nationwide, it's definitely grown in intensity. There's a lot of worry that through environmentalists and others also, they're worried that these gas companies are going to build this infrastructure across the United States to support gas, which is supposed to be a bridge fuel. Once you lay billions of dollars worth of infrastructure, you have to maintain it. You have to keep the supply coming in. And so how do we maintain that supply that we've had, and is that supply going to be adequate for a longer period of time? Well, we're going to have to frack more, and we're going to have to get more gas out of the ground. But then what happens when we export the gas? The gas price is going to go up. So that bridge fuel is going to be just as expensive, if not more, than what we're paying for coal right now. So, it's the worry is we're going to put all of this stuff into this infrastructure, and we're going to, have some kind of prosperous, but at the end of the day, we're going to have some environmental disaster on epic proportion, with fracked holes in our aquifers, pipelines that leak. They do leak on a regular basis, and we have explosions too. So we have all of this infrastructure that's being put in, and the health concerns, along with safety, is growing.
Tell us what happened this past week before the Public Service Commission. Because right at the last minute, apparently, there was going to be a hearing on October 5th, and you joined with an environmental attorney and made a presentation to the Public Service Committee. And tell us what the result was of that.
Right. Abigail Benjamin gracefully wrote a petition or a motion to intercede in the Public Service Commission process. We scrambled to get testimony, my testimony, and submit the documents that was necessary. She had indication from the Public Service Commission that it would be okay, even though we're past the deadline to submit the paperwork. So everything looked up and up. We got it in, and then that Monday morning, we got it in Sunday. That Monday morning, we heard later in Monday, we heard that they settled. Public Service Commission recognized, though, that our submission of worry and objection due to environmental issues, which are significant, they recognized that, but they settled. And so we didn't have a voice at the table.
And it seems to be that, just in terms of public comments, there were more than 60 comments in opposition to the pipeline, and maybe 3 or 4. Brad Close, the Morgan County Commissioner, Bill Clark, the Region 9 economic development person, were in favor, but overwhelmingly more than 60 people opposed. So the sentiment is, before the Service Commission was opposed, maybe they saw that train coming down the road and they didn't want to deal with it, and so they just settled it.
Exactly, and that's the other reason why they were quiet about it. That's the other reason why they pushed the Public Service Commission to make it a non-public process. That it was just an extension. It was just a change to the permit. So it didn't require a public process. Because if it was a public process, we probably would have had even more outcry, and maybe even some supporters. But at the same time, the people didn't know to raise their voice. And the Public Service Commission is an essential point in the pipeline process in West Virginia. And the reason that is it opens the door for all the other things to occur. It opens the door for eminent domain. It opens the door for them to apply for the other permits. They're kind of like the FERC in the federal process, only in the state process. And once that door is open, it's pretty hard to shut.
Do you know of any other pipeline, fossil fuel pipeline, oil and gas pipeline that comes under the Upper Potomac?
No, there's none.
So this would be a first. And what are your concerns about that project? Let's put aside, for example, for a second, C&O Canal. What are your concerns about that project that would bring the pipeline under the Potomac River?
Right. My concerns are this entire area is full of shale and karst geology. And both of those have gaps and routes that connect groundwater media to the river. And because of that connection, if there is a leak in the pipeline that goes under the river, it's going to go into the river. And that Potomac River feeds 6 million people downstream of drinking water. And when you have a contaminant like that on a regular basis, and who knows what else they could put in the gas line down the road, that's a worry. And not only does it go under the Potomac River, it goes under 4 other rivers on the West Virginia side. Sleepy Creek, Cacapon, Bat Creek, Opequon Creek.
And they would be digging under all of those rivers?
They would be digging under all of the rivers, and especially Bat Creek, which is a very pristine river in the Eastern Panhandle, probably one of the last ones besides the Cacapon. And that area has a huge karst geology on either side. And so they would have to try and either navigate around the karst geology or go through it. And when they go through it, we're looking at all kinds of potential problems.
Back to National Park Service, do you have any sense how long that process will take? Is there any chance that they will fast track it the way the Public Service Commission fast tracked this deal with Mountaineer Gas?
Well, I think I raised the alarm, and that's a good thing. And what sounds like might happen is they're going to say to Columbia Gas, National Park Service, we're not going to give you this right of entry process until you go through the FERC process.
Okay, so they're going to try and flip it.
Yeah.
But what do you have any sense of what kind of process that would be at the Park Service? Would there be hearings? Have you ever dealt with them on that?
No, see, the right of entry process is not a public process, period, ever. But, you know, typically a right of entry is like cable lines and things of that nature, you know, crossing public property where they actually have to dig on the property itself. This would be going under. So they didn't think that it was too much of a worry, but they still require it, this right of entry. But the problem is that it's not public and nobody knows about it.
All right, well, it should be, I mean, we're making it public now.
We are making it public now.
And so people
I'm gonna
know.
keep hitting the hammer on it.
And if people are concerned and want to contact the National Park Service, and there's gonna be a meeting of people concerned about the pipeline this coming Friday at 7 p.m. at the Board of Education here in Berkeley Springs. But if people are concerned about contacting the National Park Service, who should they get in touch with?
Actually, they should probably send me an email.
Okay.
That would be better to be able to quantify all of the voices. That way I can start submitting that information when I talk to the congressman, when I talk to National Park Service to say, hey, look, you know, there's a big outcry here.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, I mean, what's your email? How can people get in touch with you?
Brent at PotomacRiverkeeper.org.
All right. Now, just a couple final things. Pipeline's a big issue for you. What other issues are you working on?
So I have an initiative that's going on in Western Maryland on the Savage River. We're looking at trying to get a comprehensive watershed management plan for that river, and one of the processes that we're looking at is a federally designated wild and scenic river. It would be the first wild and scenic river in the state of Maryland.
And what kind of protection would that give it, and from what? What's threatening the river?
Well, there's really no threatening. It's already a pristine river, and it's just a layer of protection in case of a pipeline that might go across their property. It basically sets up resources, natural, valuable resources for the Savage, and it has to go through the National Park Service layer before an approval of a federal permit.
Now, when you say a pristine river, I mean, clearly the Potomac is not.
Clearly, yeah. No, the Potomac is not completely pristine. No, we're talking pristine because we have brook trout. And brook trout is a cold water species of fish that require high quality water. And the Savage produces that.
Okay, so pipeline one project, Savage River protection second, and the third is what?
The third one is actually the North Branch Potomac right now. The North Branch Potomac is seeing over the last decade.
Where's the North Branch?
North Branch Potomac is the Savage is a part of it, but it goes from Jennings Randolph Dam through Cumberland and then downriver meets the South Branch. The section that I'm talking about is from Luke, Maryland to Kaiser, West Virginia. So that section right there is typically a warm water, is designated as warm water. However, it meets the criteria for cold water on a number of cases, and we're trying to push that redesignation in the state of Maryland. And at the same time, reduce the discharges coming into that section of the river from the paper mill and from UPRC, Upper Potomac River Commission wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Well, thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
And we'll keep an eye on the pipeline. By the way, one last thing. How long do you think the pipeline battle's going to go on for?
At least a couple of years.
Because we've read in the paper where they said they want to start building in 2018.
Yeah.
Is that real, or do you think, and what are the chances that this could be defeated?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think because this isn't a transmission line, this is a feeder line and a redundant system. I think we have some pretty good chances, especially concerning the National Park Service. If we can shut down the Columbia gas line, then the Mountaineer gas line
Won't be built.
It won't be built. Right. And, which just doesn't make any sense.
Well, thank you again, Brent Walls, for joining us. And thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.